Actually, now that I have padded armor, I gotta start making new food items available in the region, so I should probably start emphasizing barley more than flax and... Oh. Oh. Alright. And they're taking suggestions? Hello everybody, been a while since I did a commentary video, but I've been kind of busy doing literally anything else due to my ADHD alternating my motivation like a clock changes time, constantly. And to be honest, there hasn't really been any major things to talk about in terms of Block Party aside from Blocks MC finally getting some attention by the competitive community. But then a couple of people dedicated to the larger Minecraft community took an interest in our game and have straight up told people in our very community that they want the best players to give advice on the game. It's definitely a unique opportunity, and I have been known to talk about Block Party extensively in the past, so I figured it wouldn't hurt to just throw everything I wanted to say into a single video and leave it at that. Little disclaimer before I start the video, my word is not law, alright? People have different ideas and opinions on what they want to see the future of Block Party be. This is my take, plain and simple. Feel free to do whatever you want with this video, feel free to completely discard it like my attention span. Alright, let's begin. I suppose I should start by talking about my qualifications as a player, so here's a brief overview. Hello, everyone. Zachary5149 here. I have been playing Block Party for 7 years now. I know, I'm old. I'll make a cringe. I know. I have won 4 major tournaments and placed in the top 4 of dozens of other tournaments. I mostly play the game competitively and still occasionally practice floors to try and get better. I am currently ranked number 4 in ratings, which is definitely not going to change in a matter of days. I don't remember exactly why I got into the game, but it appealed to me and offered a competitive scene that let me flex my skills and make new friends. So it has a lot of what I was going for. I see Block Party as a simple game where you learn from your mistakes, practice to get better, and make friends along the way. I remember the dozens of times where I would see a player that was really good at the game and do everything I could to have them acknowledge me. Mostly by beating them, but then jumping off the map so we both get to W instead, thus forcing them to be grateful to me, allowing me to talk to them. Many years have gone by since the beginning of this journey, and I kid you not when I tell you that I am probably the 3rd oldest active Block Party player. I know, total boomer. I'm practically already at a senior home, with the only 2 people who have played longer than I being Jimmy B Eclipse and I Love Candles More. I have played every major version of Block Party and at this point have a pretty set idea on what I want my ideal Block Party to be. And frankly, I have been doing everything except giving advice so far, which is the sole reason why you clicked on this video, so why don't I just stop talking and instead transition to the actual video where you can still hear me talk. This is my ultimate Block Party guide. We'll start off with a seemingly simple yet surprisingly complex topic, pacing. Block Party as a game is basically a looping code. First the game picks a map for you to play on, then it gives you a moment to move around the map and find the best spot, aka the movement phase. Then the game picks a color for you to find and go to before time runs out, the pick phase. After time runs out, the floor disappears for a moment, giving players time to fall to their deaths, the void phase. And then it just loops back around, only this time with slightly less time in the pick phase. Put simply, the longer you survive, the less time you'll have to react to and find the color the game picks for you. As the game goes on, positioning, diagnosing, and map knowledge become more and more important. More on that later. All of these phases added together make the game as a whole. And throughout Block Party's existence, I believe we have had great examples of pacing as well as bad ones. Take Hypixel for example. When its version of Block Party came out, it was hands down the slowest version of the game in all of BP history. It still would be if the pacing never changed. But it did. It went from one of the slowest versions to one of the fastest by trimming the fat but keeping the pacing balanced. Various game design choices can affect the pacing of the game. Take a map's size for example. Block Party on Hive was 48 by 48 with a 3-second movement phase. Block Party on Hypixel is a 64 by 64 with 4 seconds. I believe that both instances were pretty fitting. The larger the map, the more time you need to navigate it. The movement phase also has a lot of power in terms of positioning. More on that later. It's also important when making any game to understand what the best parts of it are. When is this game at its best? And for Block Party, the answer is simple. The late game, aka rounds where you have an incredibly small amount of time to react to the color chosen, always deciding who wins and who loses. Getting to this part of the game should be a huge focus, and you can do it in a lot of ways. In terms of pacing, and exactly what Hypixel did, they reduced the amount of time the movement phase had early on in a match, and also cut the amount of time the floor disappeared during the void phase in half. Small as they were, it saved over a minute of time and changed basically nothing. This is the power of pacing. It got to the late game faster, but kept the overall experience the same. To put a pretty little bow tie on the subject, I'd recommend the movement phase be on or near a size to limit ratio of 16:1. If a map is 32 by 32, I'd like to see the movement phase last for 2 seconds. As for the void phase, keeping it at 2 seconds I'd say works for me. That leaves us with the pick phase, aka the time you are given to find the color the game picks for you. I don't mind keeping it casual early on, but not so casual that it takes too long to reach the end game. I'd say Hypixel has it perfect at 72 seconds. Each game lasts just over 3.7 minutes, which is right where I'd want it to be. Couple of other small things, but as far as waiting for a match to start goes, aka when people are joining the lobby, I would emphasize a format that doesn't take too long even if not enough players are joining. Block MC has a timer that starts even if there's barely anyone in the lobby, and I'd like to see that implemented. Well, that just about does it for pacing. What's next? Oh boy, the big one. I cannot stress this enough. Map design is everything. Whenever I go to a different server that has Block Party, it always feels like I have a large element of the game to rediscover. This is because when it comes to Block Party, I'd say around 90% of the game is solely based on the map pool. There are so many ways maps impact the skill ceiling of the game, and ideally, to nail this point, I would like to go through all of them. And I'll start with something that already is becoming the point of focus for the game. Its size. Different versions of the game have had different sizes of its map pool, from 48 by 48 at Hive to 64 by 64 at Hypixel. On the surface, it may not seem like size really matters, when in reality it matters in a few ways. Take asymmetrical maps for example. On a 48 by 48 map, you have 2,304 blocks to place before you are done. Now look at a 64 by 64 one, which by the way is almost twice as large. Symmetrical maps are easy to make, as you can just copy one quadrant of your map, rotate it 90 degrees, and paste. Whereas asymmetrical maps require you to manually place 4 times as many blocks, making the overall difficulty of the build over 4 times more time consuming and 4 times more difficult. We can see the repercussions of this practice on Hypixel, which notoriously only has 2 maps that are asymmetrical. And even those maps have an asterisk on them, since they are just a bunch of squares instead of anything more complex. Keeping the map size small will make it easier to design asymmetrical maps, which I believe will help increase the skill ceiling of the game. There's nothing wrong with making symmetrical maps, but asymmetrical maps make it more important to study all sides of the map for potential solutions. It also unlocks a long-lost secret of Block Party's game, something that Hypixel's Block Party just doesn't offer: the meta corner. The meta corner is a side of the map where all the best spots, or at least the largest portions of them, are available. This is even more emphasized with the introduction of asymmetrical maps. If the best spot is only available on a certain part of the map, you want to position yourself around that area so you can be easily prepared for when it shows up, instead of being so far away from it that you can't reach it in time. This practice is basically non-existent on Hypixel, and it needs to be brought back. So yeah, that's asymmetrical maps for you. Let's talk about something else. Something just as important. Luck factors. Sander already touched on it during his masterful 30-second video about why he quit the game, but luck in the game of Block Party, or not going for the best spots in favor of different spots with other colors not available at the best spot, should be kept to a minimum, or at least much less than it is in its current state. Take stripes for example. Available on Hypixel, and I also refer to as the worst map in all of Block Party history. It is the only current map to ever be viable at less than 2 seconds. And with each speed that increases, the number of colors you can reach dramatically reduces. This map is notorious for how luck-based it is, and infuriating to lose to. Losing in a game of Block Party should never come down to, darn, I guess I just wasn't lucky this time. And instead should more be like, whoa, did that man just perform a 6-block jump and make it? That's pretty cool. Maybe I should try that. Knowing what you did wrong and what you can do differently is how you evolve, and not just Block Party, but in any game, or at least that's how I think it should be. This is where you look at the maps themselves when dealing with luck factors. The best spot on Stripes is missing way too many colors and has terrible viability, which is why map design is so significant. When diagnosing a map, first you need to try and find the best spot. However, depending on how far away all the colors are in the best spot, you may have to tackle the map differently. Take Cross for example, available with 1.5 seconds of time. If the map appears when there is 1.0 or 0.5 seconds of time, you won't be able to access all the colors. This means you'll have to adjust your spot when a map is no longer viable in order to reach as many colors as possible. Cross, similar to Stripes, is pretty bad with RNG, but in both scenarios, with small adjustments to the map themselves, you can make them better. When it comes to maps that aren't viable with 0.5 seconds of time, there is a certain rule I tend to follow when making my maps. The rule of ones. If a map is viable with 1 second of time, but not 0.5, the best spot on 0.5 should only be missing one color, thus minimizing luck factors substantially. If it's 1.5 second viable, it should only be missing 1 on 1 second, and the 0.5 second spot for the map should only miss 2. This pattern can repeat over and over theoretically. If this rule set is applied, maps are more easily able to be less viable, but still completely doable with only a small chance of luck interfering with the outcome of the game, instead of how it has more potential to do so on other versions. You might be wondering why maps shouldn't just always be 0.5 second viable, but honestly, I have an answer for that. Grid 1.5. Such an amazing and terrible map at the same time. Having a really difficult but iconic 1.5 second spot, a difficult 1.0 second spot with 3 missing colors, and a 0.5 second spot which is missing 5 colors. You might look at a map like this and struggle to determine how it could be made any different in order to follow the rule of ones. But in reality, it's actually kind of simple. Here we have an adjusted version of the map with the 1.0 second spot, now only missing 1 color instead of 3, and the 0.5 second spot missing only 2 instead of 5. Relatively simple changes that make the RNG factors much more bearable, while also keeping the iconic 1.5 and 1.0 second spots the same. Legit and actual good change. I won't talk about luck much more from this point on, but it's always important to remember that the more luck-based Block Party is, the less likely you'll be able to reach the best part of the game, aka the climax. Continuing with the point of viability, it's important to think about the distribution of the map pool's viability. It's generally agreed by any serious player that the more maps viable at 0.5 seconds, the better. Hypixel has it roughly at 50%, and Hive at 25. However, both of these metrics aren't enough. If it was up to me, I would want less than 5% of maps viable on 1.5 seconds, 15 to 30% viable with 1 second, and the 0.5 second maps having 60 to 80%. Speaking of map viability, something else to note about this topic is how far 0.5 seconds of time actually is. It changes depending on how fast you are reacting, how well you can time your last second jump, as well as if any speed effects are currently applied to you, which has always been speed 2. Sometimes a map is firstly thought to be viable on a lower speed, only to months or even years later discover that, yes, it's actually 0.5 seconds viable. It's just a really hard jump. For 0.5 seconds of time, the upper limit is around 6.5 blocks. However, with the potential changes to the coding for this game, it's possibly going to be closer to 5 to 5.5 blocks. For 1 second, it's around 9 blocks, and 1.5 is around 12. These are important things to think about when designing a map. If you want it to be viable on a certain speed, you need to place your blocks in a manner of which it is within the possible distances that can be covered for that speed. Distance is also important when it comes to designing the best spot. The further apart the blocks at the best spot are, the harder the map is as a result. One of the other talking points Sander used in his video is that a lot of maps on Hypixel, for example, are simply too easy, with a lot of the best spots having all the colors cramped next to each other, or having enough wiggle room to perform poorly on the map but still survive pretty easily. Distance alone, however, isn't the only thing you can do to make jumps harder. Maps that force you to have 360-degree awareness like this map are pretty challenging. You can also try to make the best spots on each map less obvious by making certain colors rarer than others. You can also make maps asymmetrical, so certain areas of the map may be good but not great, requiring you to search every part of the map to find the best spot. You can make maps viable on certain rounds in different locations. You can make the areas you need to jump to smaller, requiring more precision. So many ways to make maps harder, but also more fair. Something that was introduced in Hypixel's version of the game was static floors. Floors that don't have random color generation, but instead a set pattern every time. All that I can say here is that I can only imagine how much tougher maps would be if the colors were random. Imagine these two maps and how much more complex they would be. But that's a good thing, not a bad one. Remove set floors. The number of colors each map should have doesn't really bother me so long as there aren't too many background colors, aka colors that are basically available everywhere on the entire map. I've never seen a map that has over 15 colors, and I don't mind it staying that way. What I do mind is that Hypixel is seemingly allergic to the color brown. I wish I could ask the developers why they chose to keep that color out of the game entirely. Bring brown back, please. Also, one last thing that hasn't been recommended before is that I think it isn't a terrible idea is the introduction of map percentages. Depending on the round, the chances of certain maps appearing over others will change. For example, if it's a 1.0 second round, the chances of a 1 second map appearing can be like 75%. Or, if it's 0.5 seconds, the chances of a 0.5 second map appearing would be like 80%. Another thing that should change is the number of Speed 12 rounds we have per game. If we make the late game more viable while doing our best to keep it challenging, we can change the speed layouts to include more 0.5 second rounds. Okay, section 2 over. That was a lot. Now we're going to be talking about power-ups. Power-ups are something that I only care about for one reason. Competitively, most of the time, power-ups are banned, so it just doesn't matter, but I believe that with great power comes great responsibility. And there is a power-up there that is so broken, so OP, so unfair, so absolutely game-breaking that it literally plays the game for you. This is the worst decision in Block Party history, and I will die on that perch. And it is also why I don't play Bedrock BP. Do I think power-ups should exist? I don't really care, but under no circumstance should something like this exist. Absolutely, completely ridiculous. Absolutely, positively ridiculous. Actually, I do have one more thing to talk about in relation to power-ups, and it actually is a perfect segue to my next talking point. Dying. Is there an afterlife? Do I get reincarnated into a spider? Is cereal a soup? All of these are valid questions, but I'm not going anywhere with this, which makes the entire bit a waste of time. Anyhow, I had to mention being eliminated in Block Party because it's such an easy problem that has a stupidly simple solution, but for the life of me, nobody is able to do it right. On Hypixel, there are like 3 situations where you can be below the map on round 25 and still win. Yes, I said 3. Number 1, jumping into the void. Yes, you can do that. No, I don't get why. Number 2, shift glitching. It's basically where you miss a jump, but shift on a block, which dramatically slows your fall. It's created all sorts of controversies where player A survived, but player B shift glitched, fell below the map, and still won. And lastly, feathers. If you have a feather at all on round 25, you can just use it and automatically win. All 3 of these issues are solely based on how Hypixel coded the death field, and all of them can be solved with an extremely simple single line of code. Look, it's simple. You include a line of code that checks a player's positional value just before the floor resets for the next round. If the player has a Y value anywhere below the floor, auto-eliminate them. Also, I just got done talking with Sander, and apparently, jump potions can also let you do the exact same thing. Bro, Hypixel is broken. One more small detail before moving on, but I also don't want the death floor to function the same way it does on Block MC, where you just instantly die if you were like a single block below the floor. Maybe they didn't foresee how it would competitively influence games, or maybe they just didn't care, but Block MC allows you to fail and still succeed. Victory and defeat is now up to ping and lag, not skill, which, yeah, I am definitely not a fan of. Hence why I want the code to wait a second or two before eliminating players. Cosmetics and ranks. I am a firm believer that ranks should make a return in the next version of Block Party. Ranks are a great way of rewarding people who grind the game, and it is a unique way to show off your dedication to the game. I would recommend introducing an item that toggles player visibility from fully transparent to see-through to off entirely. The block that appears in your inventory should appear in the 5th slot and should be coded so it always shows in your hand the moment the color gets picked. Everything else from there I don't really care about, so long as it is able to be turned off. Particles, music, etc. Night vision should be allowed. Multiple versions of the game have done different things with this. Hypixel has it on, Hive had it off. Just make it an option. We need community resources that provide resource packs for the game. Thus concludes Section 4. Section 5. Keeping the game relevant. Well, Hypixel's alternate hyper mode is actually pretty fun and a cool mix-up. I mean, I'll never be good at it so long as I live, but whatever. Server-hosted tournaments. Oh my god, please. We haven't had one in over 5 years, and it would be insane. Another way to keep the game relevant, you ask? Consider this. Letting the community make even more maps after it's released. I cannot tell you how awesome it would have been if the devs for Hive BP gave out more opportunities for their community to add maps. Alright, so how long have I been recording? 30 minutes?! 30 minutes! I have been talking for 30 minutes. Okay, screw an outro.